What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Interesting news in the world of boxing. It looks like Floyd Mayweather versus Robert Guerrero, set to face off May 4th, needs to be accompanied by another undercard fight. They were initially trying to do Austin Trout versus Canelo for the undercard, and now it looks like Canelo has pulled out of that date, and it looks like the Austin Trout versus Canelo fight is going to be taking place now on April 20th. So they're trying to finalize that deal and have the Austin Trout and Canelo on April 20th. And they're excluding it from the Mayweather Guerrero fight. And from what I read from Richard Schaefer and the reports online, basically, Canelo was taking a stance saying he's not fighting on the undercard unless Mayweather promises him or guarantees him a fight, Mayweather versus Canelo, in September. Now, I find this kind of unusual for a variety of different reasons. One, Canelo has a large fan base. Can't take anything away from him in that regard. He definitely has a following. However, I don't think he realizes that he doesn't have as much pull as he thinks he has, even with that fan base, because um, his resume. I mean, plain and simple, his resume. He's a young, up and coming talent. I'm anxious to see more. I've seen him. He's an entertaining fighter, and he definitely has potential. But the biggest thing from hardcore boxing fans, not biased fans that just only like Canelo or only like fighters for certain reasons or pedigree and heritage and all that, most boxing fans unanimously decided that they like Canelo, they see growth, but they want to see him against better opponents. And the same could be said for plenty of fighters. Um, Gary Russell Jr. is just an example that comes off the top of my head. Yeah, he's destroying these guys that are in front of him, but we have yet to see him fight somebody who's a ranked opponent. And the biggest difference between a Gary Russell Jr. and a Canelo is Gary Russell Jr. comes from a fighting family. So does Canelo. Canelo's brother fought and lost to Austin Trout. Um, Gary Russell Jr. has about six brothers, and he did the amateur way. Like, he went the amateur route, whereas Canelo turned pro at 15 in Mexico, and he was fighting a lot of journeymen and learning on the job, so to speak. Whereas a fighter like Gary Russell Jr. went as far as making the Olympic team, and Gary Russell Jr. ended up coming down with some kind of illness, so he had to pull out of the Olympic Games. So he never had the opportunity to compete, but he won Golden Gloves and again made the Olympic team, and he did the whole amateur background. He fought people like Roberto Marroquin, the one that fought Guillermo Rigondeaux, and he fought a lot of other people in the amateur. So that's the difference between a fighter like Gary Russell Jr. and Canelo. Just because Gary Russell Jr. has an amateur background, and keep in mind, an amateur background doesn't necessarily translate to a successful pro boxing career. However, he's a little bit more tested when you see people like that's why a lot of people like Guillermo Rigondeaux or Gennady Golovkin, I think they give them a lot more credit than what they've done professionally, just because they do have a seasoned amateur background and they have been fighting for quite some time. And people like Gennady Golovkin did fight fighters like Andre Durrell in the amateurs and that kind of thing. So Canelo, he's the jury is really out for him as far as I'm concerned, just because his resume has been a lot of matchmaking, undersized opponents, people who weren't on win streaks, fighters who weren't in their prime anymore. So people want to see what he's capable of. Not that he can't do it. We just want to see it. We want to see him matched against someone, a top 154 pounder in their prime. So Austin Trout is definitely a good fight for that. So it's just crazy to me because, again, Canelo has a huge fan base, but I don't think he has enough pull to. Mayweather just did a history, like, or excuse me, a historic deal with Showtime and CBS. He pretty much calls the shots, whether you like him or not, and you're not going to be able to force the number one highest paid athlete into something that you want. If Canelo's fan base and his level of pull is still not on a Mayweather level, despite fans might like Canelo better or some people, it's just he's not. When it comes to the networks and it comes to the business, he doesn't have as much pull, and that's to be expected. Canelo hasn't been a star in America as long as someone like Mayweather, who's been in the sport for 16, 17 years. So it's just crazy that Canelo would request that and and refuse to fight unless he's guaranteed a date with Mayweather. And to him of all people, he should know he has a fucking curse named after him, the Canelo curse. You're not supposed to look that far to the future in the sport of boxing. What happens when they were going to make the Victor Ortiz versus Canelo in September? All Victor Ortiz had to do was get past Josecito, who was coming from 140. And guess what? The Canelo curse prevented that from happening. There was another fight. I can't even think off the top of my head. But there's another fight, and the fighter was supposed to win and face Canelo, and then they lost. I can't think off the top of my head, but he has a curse named after him. So Floyd's been out of the ring. He was in jail. We don't know what his condition. We haven't seen him since. By the time that Guerrero fights him, it'll be virtually about exactly a year. Plus, he's getting older. Some people said he slowed down in the Cotto fight, or he's slowing down. He's been inactive for a year. So some people think that's going to catch up to him. So he has a tough task against a fighter like Robert Guerrero, who's been asking for this fight over a year. He feels he's ready. He's younger. He's a fighter with heart, and he has a chin. So, I mean, Mayweather has a tough task with that. And so does Canelo with Trout. This is probably the toughest test for both of them at this point of their career, at this particular juncture. So for Canelo to be like, I'm not fighting on the undercard unless Mayweather guarantees me a September date. I mean, there's no guarantee that Canelo will beat Trout, and there's no guarantee that Mayweather will beat Guerrero. I mean, people have their opinions on who they think will win. I have my opinions. I'm sure you guys have yours. But trust me, to the people that are saying that Canelo knocks out Trout in one round and all kinds of destruction, it's possible, because anything's happened. Like, anything's possible. I mean, personally, I didn't think John Molina would get knocked out in 58 seconds, 55 seconds against DeMarco. I thought the fight would last a little bit longer, but it didn't. So, I mean, it's possible, but I highly doubt that. Especially in the sport of boxing, it's not every day you see like world titleists get knocked out in the first round. Like, you see Lucas Matisse versus Mike Dallas Jr. Yeah, Mike Dallas Jr., he definitely got knocked out in one round. And I'm not saying it's never happened, but is there anyone that's willing to argue with me and say that they thought Mike Dallas Jr. was going to beat Lucas Matisse? Mike Dallas Jr., the person that got knocked out by Josecito. You know what I mean? We all know Lucas Matisse hits like a freight train, so I even made my prediction video. It was just a matter of time. I didn't know he was going to get knocked out in the first round, but I figured he would get knocked out. So, again, back to Canelo, Trout, Mayweather. Trout definitely has a chance to beat him. I think he has a great chance to beat Canelo, just based on his level of slickness and ring intelligence and his size. The biggest question in my mind that determines if Canelo beats Trout is Trout's ability to take Canelo's punch. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If he can take Canelo's punch like he did with Cotto and not let it show, if he is hurt, then Canelo's going to be in for a long night. But if he gets buzzed and Canelo does away with him, then that's something else. But I definitely expect Trout to be the busier fighter, the more crafty, better footwork. Again, Canelo sometimes takes breaks in rounds, and he's great with his combination punches. He's strong, and looks like he has good training and all that. So I'm looking forward to a good fight. But for the people that are making it like it's a 90-10% fight, I definitely don't have those type of odds. I really think it's close to a 50-50 fight where either man can win. It's just who exercises their will, who has the better game plan, who makes adjustments. And then obviously things like power come into play. So I don't know. It's just weird that Canelo decided to do that. You would have been on Showtime pay-per-view. Now if they do Canelo versus Trout on April 20th, I believe that would probably just be on regular Showtime or HBO. I don't think it would be a pay-per-view event. Not that it's not worthy of a pay-per-view. I just don't think they would make that a pay-per-view event. I mean, what Canelo fight has been pay-per-view thus far? Canelo versus Josecito, that wasn't a pay-per-view event. Versus Alfonso Gomez wasn't pay-per-view. The only one that was Mosley, that I can remember, Canelo, and he wasn't even headline. It was the undercard to a Mayweather fight against Cotto. So, I'm looking forward to all these fights. I'm glad that just at least these fights are still taking place, even though they're on separate dates. My personal opinion for Golden Boy, I think what they should do, which would be excellent, because I really want to see Canelo versus Trout. And since Canelo felt, since Mayweather wouldn't give him the guarantee to face him in September, I think they should put Abner Mars versus Ponce de Leon on the Mayweather undercard. I think that would be exciting. And if they could somehow put Josecito versus Maidana or just one of those fights on the undercard, then I think this is still a very exciting card. Personally, when I watched the Marquez versus Pacquiao 4, that undercard, I thought it was going to be a lot better, like based on the matchups. I believe Miguel Vasquez was on it. That fight was kind of boring to me. And then Gamboa had a fight on there too. And that fight was, he just looked rusty. It wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be for an undercard. So either way, if they were able to get Josecito and Maidana, or if they're able to get Ponce de Leon and Abner Mars on the undercard, I think that does a lot for boxing. I think it's still an action-packed card. And we could just watch Canelo and Trout on his own separate day, and they can just try to build up a card there. Or if they're able to somehow, some way, get Lucas Matisse versus Lamont Peterson on the Mayweather Guerrero undercard, I think that also makes for an excellent, excellent card. So I hopefully they don't go too far, because Canelo versus Trout, that's definitely a fight I want to see. So hopefully they are able to squeeze in a highly anticipated fight on the Mayweather Guerrero undercard. Any of the fights that I mentioned would be great in my opinion. But just to close up, I don't think Canelo is necessarily in the right with this. Just trying to force someone to sign up for a fight in September when you still have a lot to prove. You have a tough test ahead of you. Mayweather has a tough test ahead of him. It just doesn't make sense to me. Some of you guys who are pro Canelo, anti Mayweather are going to say, "Oh, Floyd's scared" or something like that. But that's not smart business, in my opinion. It doesn't make sense. So what if Trout beats Canelo some kind of way? Because some of you guys think he won't. But so let's say Trout beats Canelo, and Mayweather signed a contract saying that he's going to fight Canelo in September, regardless. So you think it's deserved on Canelo's end if he loses to Trout? Or what if Mayweather loses to Guerrero? What if it's a unanimous decision and he loses to Guerrero? Then he's already signed up for another fight. He might want to avenge his Guerrero loss or whatever happens. So to me, I don't think it's smart business. And Canelo, based on the fact that he has a whole curse named after him about fights that were made in advance that never panned out because of upsets and unforeseen things happen, it seems like they would know better. And it seems like Canelo would take that into consideration and just stayed on the undercard. Another example of this, they were trying to pre-plan and make this fucking Manny Pacquiao versus Brandon Rios fight. And I guess they just assumed Pacquiao was going to win for the third time on paper against Marquez. And then Pacquiao got knocked out brutally in the 6th round. So there goes the Brandon Rios versus Pacquiao fight, at least for right now. So that's my opinion. I don't really condone the promoters and fighters trying to make all these premeditated plans when they haven't even finished the opponent in front of them. They haven't even crossed that bridge yet. So it doesn't really make sense to me. You can't look past opponents. Amir Khan, I think, looked past Danny Garcia. He paid the price for it, got punched on the neck, never recovered. So I don't really condone that. That's just my opinion. Again, I'm just glad that these fights are still taking place. I hope there's no other problems. Let me know what you guys want to see. Who would you want to see on the Canelo Trout undercard? And who do you want to see on the Mayweather Guerrero undercard? Let me know some. Until next video, it's Ego signing off.